Hello, and I hope you enjoyed that sick new intro video. It's pretty great, right? Anyway, today's title is Suburbia and Intellectual Momentum, or Intellectual Inertia. And essentially, that is an idea that ideas have a certain staying power and they have a certain cultural momentum, and it takes a great deal of effort and people and historical trends to really reverse those ideas and to break them down. We can really see this happening in real time over the last 5 to 10 years with the internet and various things. But specifically, the main idea I want to touch upon is suburbia and the intellectual momentum of suburbia. Now, suburbia is a very recent development. It didn't really exist until, I would say, the 1940s, 1950s. And what made it possible is the automobile. So before the mass ownership of the automobile and the highway system, suburbia was kind of, it was just a pipe dream. It didn't really exist. So also exploding populations and the mass mining and refining of oil and cheap oil also made suburbia possible. Now we're coming. I think we're coming to a close of suburbia, and obviously I feel that way as someone who is a huge proponent of Ancapistan. Ancapistan is the antithesis of suburbia. It is a new age in many ways. Entirely, because it's a whole new lifestyle, it's a whole new economy, it's a whole new organization of society. And one of the main reasons that we have to get away from suburbia is the second law of thermodynamics. Now, you may be mildly familiar with this, but I'll refresh your memory. The second law of thermodynamics means that energy goes from a heightened state or an organized state to a lower energy disorganized state. And there's only two things, interestingly enough, that increase entropy or go against the law of thermodynamics. Number one is the sun, fusion within the sun. And then number two is actually life forms. Life forms can increase the organization of the universe. But everything else that mankind knows of decreases the energy state and decreases the organization of the existing physical universe itself. Now that seems like a really wild concept to connect it to suburbia. You might be really confused right now, so I'm going to break it down some more. When you burn gasoline, you are taking the oil, which is in a high energy state, and you're converting it into water and CO2, which is a low energy state. And the reason that oil has value is because the high energy state can do work, and it is inherently valuable. Work meaning move around products, operate an excavator, heat and melt different materials into new materials, things of that nature. The big one is movement through the internal combustion engine. And by driving in circles within suburbia and by living in such a low density spread out state, we are requiring far more oil commodities than is necessary to live in an otherwise prosperous way. The ratio, according to my calculations, is as high as either 20 to 1 or as high as 50 to 1, which is the 95 to 98% reduction in fossil fuels. So we are burning up 50 times less fossil fuels and wasting 1/50th of the important commodities that we need to survive. These high energy states that have accumulated over millions and millions of years. And why would we want to burn more than we possibly need to in order to have a prosperous modern lifestyle? These should be cherished. I mean, think about the word itself, resource, right? You don't waste the resources. Wars are fought over resources. The wars in the Middle East that we're in right now, Iraq and et cetera, are in many ways wars over oil. So we're shedding blood for resources that we are wasting on a massive, epic national scale. Megatons and gigatons of these resources are being burned up for what amounts to very little human flourishing and human happiness. And Ancapistan is an idea, it is a concept, it is a method of human organization that allows us to exist and to prosper with 1/50th of the actual physical commodities being burned. So we can save these high energy states, and we can resist the second law of thermodynamics, which is essentially in kind of like a ticking clock. It's almost like the death of human civilization, or the aging and the death of human civilization. And the faster we burn these resources, the faster human civilization ages and dies, or at least our modern technological global capitalist civilization. So it is imperative and necessary that we move to a more efficient system as quickly as possible. But it's so difficult because culturally, intellectually, psychologically, we're so used to sitting in traffic. We're so used to having big lawns and spread out commercial venues and all of these things. And to fight decades worth of cultural and intellectual inertia, hopefully does not take decades. I really hope so. And that's why I'm making content like this, to try and tip the scales a little bit and multiply my voice across space and time, possibly going viral into your minds and into your souls, so that you can really see and understand the urgency and the necessity that has to take place with this transition. Now, switching gears a little bit, I think some people are triggered by the word Ancapistan because they are believers of the state, the all-powerful state. And I have mentioned this, I think, maybe once or twice in previous videos, but I'm going to rehash it really quick. The state requires legislation to get things done. The state requires 51% of the population to support it, or even 60% of the population to support it. And then Congress takes their time to vote, and then there's the lobbyists, which are going to convince Congress to vote with the oligarchy and with the large mega corporations and the ultra-rich, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, and even to get something to go to a vote, even to get an idea to go to a vote, you have to live in Washington, D.C., and you have to spend 10 to 20 years convincing Washington, D.C. to vote on it. So the alternative is to operate within the free market, operate within capitalism, and that requires 0.001% of society to agree with your idea. I can get Ancapistan started with 100 people anywhere I want in the entire United States. And guess what? Holes will be dug, bricks will be laid, people will be housed. And the alternative to that free market system is going through the state, where I need to convince 200 million people that it's a good idea, and then I need to move to Washington, D.C. and lobby for 20 years just so they can vote on it on the floor of Congress, and then it'll probably fail anyway. So ask yourself, between those two routes, and based on the intellectual inertia that I just discussed, which route would you take? Which route is more likely to succeed? Which route do all innovative ventures take? They always take the route of free market capitalism because that's where all innovation comes from. And the reason for that is because you don't need legislation. You don't need 65% public support. You don't need a mass movement. You don't need some hashtag on social media. You just bring a product to market at a price that people will agree to. And Ancapistan is the product, and the price is $250 a month. It's really that simple. People complicate life way too much, and people are blinded by the state, and people are blinded by the flag. Me and a friend of mine were talking about the power of the flag and the symbol, and like the extreme control it has over people. And I'm just not really I'm not really about that. And if anyone listening is horribly triggered by that fact, I'm sorry for you. I really am, because you have a very limited and restricted view of the world and a restricted view of human civilization. We live in a dynamic pool of people and things and activity, and to think that Congress is the only game in town is crippling, depressing, short-sighted, ignorant, and wrong. So that's why Ancapistan is Ancapistan, and that is also why Ancapistan is going to succeed. It is going to happen because fuck the majority. But yeah, and another thing, right? So intellectual inertia. No idea has ever went from 0% to 65%. No idea has ever went from nothing to mandatory legislation with like the Green New Deal, $20 trillion, whatever. It starts off with 20 people who dedicate their lives to making it a reality. And those 20 people turn into 100. And then those 100 people get 1,000 customers. Those 1,000 customers show their family and friends. That 1,000 customers turns into 20,000 customers, etc., etc., etc. That's how real change happens. That's how real change has always happened, and that's how Ancapistan is going to happen. And it's just not going to be through legislation. So everyone needs to drop their Marxist, statist bullshit and become a customer. Another thing, a lot of you might have a problem with the cost and say, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, it's never going to happen. But the current figures are about $18,000 to $20,000 per person for the construction costs to get the entire thing built, right? And then it will last and stand for 250 years. Now, $20,000 is like half of the price of what your average person pays for college. And people say, oh, we can't build human paradise. We can't afford human paradise for half of the price of fucking college. Are you kidding me? I mean, people save for 10 years to pay for college, and then they spend 4 years of their lives sitting in class, all for a sheet of paper. Meanwhile, Ancapistan gives you a physical skyscraper for half of the price. And that skyscraper saves the environment and cuts all of your bills for the rest of your life by 80%. So I don't know. It's a tough choice. Ancapistan versus college, real tough choice. But all I can do is put my product on the market and see if the consumer changes their lifestyle towards a more harmonious way of living that conserves the second law of thermodynamics as much as possible. Because we need to save that sweet, sweet crude for our children and our grandchildren. And we really owe it to them to do the right thing, and to do the right thing as soon as possible. So join me by becoming a customer, and let's put an end to suburbia and bring about a new age together. Thank you, and have a nice day.